Camera opens on a pristine silver SUV melting under streams of liquid. She saved for 3 years to buy her dream car. 48 hours later, it was destroyed. Cut to Karen's face. Shock, then rage. But the HOA cameras caught everything. And what they recorded didn't just expose the culprit. It unraveled a conspiracy that had been poisoning their community for years. Beat. The twist hits. The person who did it? She never saw it coming. The morning sun hit the driveway at exactly 6:47 a.m., the same time it always did in the Pine Ridge subdivision. Karen Hartwell stood in her kitchen, coffee mug suspended halfway to her lips, staring through the bay window at her brand-new 2024 Range Rover. Silver pearl. Loaded, financed to the absolute limit of what the bank would allow. 3 years of overtime shifts, weekend retail work, and aggressive budgeting had led to this moment. The car gleamed under the October light like a trophy. She'd parked it there last night at 9:15 p.m., right in her designated spot on Magnolia Drive, number 47. She'd washed it immediately, obsessively checking the tires, the trim, the suspension. At 42 years old, Karen deserved this. After the divorce, after being passed over for manager twice at the insurance company, after her daughter Sarah had chosen to live with her father across town, this car was hers. Just hers. By 7:03 a.m., it looked like something from a horror film. Karen's mug hit the kitchen tile and shattered. She was already moving, barefoot, across the cold hardwood floor and through the garage door before her brain caught up with what her eyes were seeing. The Range Rover's hood, doors, and side panels were covered in dark streaks. Not paint. Not anything that should be there. The metal was pitted, bubbling. The paint had dissolved in irregular patches, revealing primer underneath. And the smell, acrid, chemical, wrong. No, 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 no. She touched the hood with one finger and jerked her hand back. It was warm. The metal was warm and tacky. She ran to grab a rag from the garage, her mind already spiraling through insurance claims and repair costs and the sick, certain knowledge that nothing would ever be quite right again. That's when she saw it. A plastic bleach bottle. Empty, discarded in the shrub bed beside her driveway. Not bleach. The label was smudged, but she could make out partial letters. HYDRA. Hydrochloric acid. Industrial grade. The kind you didn't just find lying around. Karen's hands started shaking. By 8:15 a.m., Officer Tom Delgado was standing in her driveway, examining the damage with the expression of someone who'd seen most things in his 15 years with the county police. He was in his mid-50s, graying at the temples, the kind of cop who'd responded to enough HOA disputes to know that suburban crime was rarely what it seemed. "Any enemies?" he asked, not unkindly. Karen nearly laughed. "I work in insurance and I coach youth basketball. I'm literally the least threatening person alive." "How much damage are we talking?" "The repair estimate is $42,000. The dealership said they might not even be able to get the paint to match. It could be a total loss." Delgado whistled low. "Someone's angry at you." "Or someone's disturbed," Karen said. "Who does this?" But even as she said it, she knew. In a place like Pine Ridge, where the HOA meetings got heated over lawn ornaments and the Facebook group had 847 members dedicated to finding reasons to fine each other, the list of possibilities was longer than she wanted to. Admit the subdivision had changed over the past 5 years. It used to be friendly. Now it was competitive, bitter. There were the McMansion people like the Kellers on Sycamore, who'd hired contractors to triple the size of their home and somehow gotten the Architectural Review Board to approve it despite community complaints. There were the people like the Chens, who'd painted their shutters an unapproved shade of blue and had been fined $400. There was Margaret Stott, the HOA president, who seemed to take personal offense at anyone who deviated even slightly from the community standards, and then there was Judith Crane. Karen and Judith had been friendly once, 3 years ago before the incident at the community pool. Before Judith's daughter had accused someone of stealing her phone. Before the Facebook posts, before the surveillance cameras were installed everywhere, before Judith had become convinced that Karen had started the rumor that destroyed her family's reputation in the subdivision. It had all been baseless. Genuinely. but Judith had never let go of it. Karen had seen her at the coffee shop last month, and Judith's face had gone stone cold. "We'll need to talk to your neighbors," Delgado was saying. "See if anyone saw anything. When was the last time you looked at the vehicle before it was damaged?" 9:15 last night. "I parked it and went inside. Any noise during the night? Glass breaking, chemical reaction sounds?" Karen shook her head. She'd slept like the dead, exhausted from a double shift at work and a long Saturday evening of volunteer coaching. "Well," Delgado said, snapping photos with his phone, "the HOA has cameras. Margaret Stott, the president, had them installed about 2 years ago after some mailbox incidents. They cover most of the common areas and the perimeter of the neighborhood. We should be able to pull footage. It was like a light switch flipped inside Karen's chest. Someone had done this. Someone had destroyed her car with industrial acid, and cameras had caught them. Whoever they were, they'd made a mistake. They'd acted on anger or envy or whatever dark impulse had driven them, and they'd been recorded. Justice, she thought. The word felt clean, simple, possible. The HOA office was a small building near the community center, managed by Margaret Stott's assistant, Derek. He was in his early 30s, perpetually stressed, and he looked actively panicked when Officer Delgado explained what they needed. "The cameras," Derek said, pulling up the footage on a desktop computer. "Right. Yes, we have continuous recording on all the exterior units. Let me pull up the feeds from—" He typed rapidly, then frowned at the screen. "Okay. So we have clear footage from the front entrance cameras, the pool area, and the perimeter near the common green. For the residential streets, coverage is spotty. We have 3 units that cover Magnolia Drive, but they're positioned at the intersection of Maple and Magnolia outside the Henderson's place and on the corner of Sycamore. Can you pull footage from last night?" Delgado asked. "Say 9 p.m. to 8 a.m.? Derek's fingers flew across the keyboard. Minutes stretched. The office filled with the sound of his typing and the quiet hum of the computer. Karen's heart was thundering. This was it. The moment someone became a suspect instead of a mystery. The screen flickered to life, showing a time-stamped feed, 11:47 p.m., Magnolia Drive. The street was empty, lined with cars, quiet in the way suburbs got at night. 54 p.m., nothing. 12:03 a.m., still nothing. 12:16 a.m., Derek paused. "Wait, is that—" A figure moved into frame wearing a dark hoodie, hands in pockets, walking deliberately down the street. Their face was obscured by shadow and the hood's brim, but their walk was distinctive, purposeful, angry somehow, in the set of their shoulders. The figure stopped directly in front of Karen's driveway. Officer Delgado leaned forward. "Keep it rolling." The figure pulled something from their jacket, a bottle. They uncapped it and began pouring the liquid directly onto the hood of the Range Rover. The camera caught the glint of it. The methodical way they moved along the car's surface, coating it with careful precision. It wasn't panicked. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, personal. Someone taking their time to destroy something they wanted destroyed. The acid hissed faintly, even through the camera's audio. It took 3 minutes. When they were done, the figure recapped the bottle, turned, and walked directly toward the camera before pulling the hoodie down. Karen's breath caught. It was Judith Crane, unmistakably. Her gray-streaked hair, her distinctive face, the sharp angle of her, jaw all caught perfectly in the camera's light. Judith looked directly at the lens for a single moment, just long enough for Karen to know it was intentional, and then she walked away into the darkness. The timestamp read, 12:19 a.m. Officer Delgado straightened up, and his voice was steady, professional, but with an edge of something Karen recognized as genuine satisfaction. "That's your culprit." Karen felt the floor shift beneath her. Not from justice. From betrayal. From the certain knowledge that someone she'd tried to be kind to, someone she'd actually defended in community forums, had done this. Had taken the time. Had walked to her house. Had destroyed her dream with deliberate, patient fury, and then she understood something else, something that made her stomach turn cold. Judith had looked at the camera. She'd known they were there. She hadn't cared. She'd done it anyway, boldly, because she was either desperate or unstable or both, or because she was counting on something Margaret Stott had done or hadn't done. The footage, Karen heard herself ask. Who has access to it? Derek glanced at Delgado, then back at Karen. Margaret approves all requests. She keeps copies, obviously, for the office records, and technically she's supposed to preserve footage if there's a police matter. Technically? Karen's voice sounded hollow even to herself. Well, Derek said carefully, she doesn't always respond quickly to preservation requests. We've had some friction in the office lately. Officer Delgado was already pulling out his phone, his jaw tight. Derek, I'm going to need those files sent to my office immediately, and I need you to document exactly when I requested them and what was provided. Can you do that? Of course. Right now? Right now. As Derek moved to comply, Karen's mind was racing down a path that started with Judith pouring acid on her car and ended somewhere much darker. She thought about the heated HOA meetings. She thought about Margaret's obsessive rule enforcement. She thought about the way Margaret had looked at Karen last month, with something that could have been pity or could have been something else entirely. She thought about the question Officer Delgado had asked. How much damage? $42,000, a figure that would make headlines in the community, a crime that would justify Margaret's expensive camera system and her strict hand on the HOA's authority, a perfect storm of opportunity, motive and consequence that only made sense if Karen was completely wrong about what had just happened. The real crime wasn't the acid on her car, it was what Margaret Stott had paid Judith Crane to do it. Officer Delgado didn't. Arrest Judith Crane immediately. That was the first sign something was wrong. Karen sat in the police station's waiting area, a cup of cold coffee untouched on the chair beside her, watching through the glass partition as Delgado spoke quietly with his lieutenant. Their body language told her everything. This wasn't straightforward. This wasn't a simple case of vandalism that would be closed by lunch. She'd been waiting for 40 minutes. The police station smelled like old carpet and desperation, the particular brand of desperation that accumulates in a building full of people who've made bad decisions. Karen had never been inside one before. The reality of it was smaller than she'd expected, more mundane. She'd imagined dramatic interrogations and quick justice. Instead, she got fluorescent lights and the sound of someone's phone ringing repeatedly in an adjacent room. Delgado finally emerged. His tie loosened, his expression carefully neutral in a way that made her stomach tighten. We found Judith, he said, sitting down across from her. She's at home. When we approached with the warrant, she didn't resist. She's cooperating, did she confess? Karen heard the desperate hope in her own voice. She's not denying she poured the acid, Delgado said carefully. But Karen, I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Margaret Stott ever contacted you? Offered you anything? Asked you to do anything for the HOA? Karen's chest tightened. No. I mean, she sends the monthly newsletters. There was that incident 3 years ago with Judith's daughter and the phone, but that wasn't— I know about that, Delgado interrupted. What I'm asking is whether Margaret has made any recent contact with you. No. Why? Delgado stood up and gestured for her to follow. Come with me. They walked through a narrow hallway lined with bulletin boards and wanted posters, past a break room where a detective was eating a sandwich, and into a small interview room with a metal table and chairs that looked deliberately uncomfortable. Delgado pulled out his laptop and opened a video file. This is from Judith's home security camera, he said. From 3 weeks ago, the video showed Judith's living room. She was sitting on a couch facing the camera directly. Across from her, partially out of frame, was someone. Karen could only see the back of their head. Blonde, styled, professional-looking. The audio came through tinny but clear. Need this done carefully, the voice said. It was Margaret. Unmistakably Margaret. She's been spreading rumors about my daughter for 3 years. About my family. Everyone in this community knows what she did. I don't know if I can— Judith started. You can, Margaret said sharply. And you will. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone finds out about your credit card fraud. The one you committed at Nordstrom. The one you've been paying off quietly for 2 years. The video cut out. Karen felt the world tilt sideways. Margaret knew, she whispered. About Judith's. How did she know that? That's one of several questions we're pursuing, Delgado said quietly. Judith apparently underwent bankruptcy counseling last year, and the paperwork was filed with the county court. It's public record, but not the kind of thing most people would dig into. Margaret seems to have done her homework, so she blackmailed her. She blackmailed Judith into destroying my car. According to Judith's statement, yes. Margaret approached her 3 weeks ago. She said she had information about Judith's financial problems, and she wanted something done about Karen Hartwell. She was very specific about it. The acid, the timing, the camera angle. She wanted Karen to see the footage. She wanted it to be obvious who did it. Karen stood up abruptly, her chair scraping backwards. Why? Why would she want me to see? That's where it gets complicated, Delgado said. He pulled up another file on his laptop. This one was a financial spreadsheet. The HOA has been hemorrhaging money for the past 18 months. Margaret took over as president 4 years ago, and she's made increasingly aggressive decisions about enforcement and fines. Residents have been complaining. There was a petition last month asking for her removal. Karen felt something cold sliding down her spine. She'd signed that petition. She and 43 other residents had. The camera system cost $70,000 to install. Delgado continued. Margaret justified it by saying it would help prevent crime and property disputes. But the HOA has been struggling to pay for it. They've had to raise fees 3 times. And she thought if something dramatic happened... Karen's voice trailed off as understanding crashed into her. If a resident had her car destroyed, and we could prove it was on camera, and she could be the one to provide the footage and help catch the criminal, it would make her look good. It would make the camera system look like a worthwhile investment. It would justify the fees, the enforcement, all of it. She'd be the hero who'd solved the crime and protected the community. But why me? Karen asked. Why my car? Delgado's silence was answer enough. I signed the petition, Karen said flatly. The one to remove her. So did the Kellers. So did the Chens. So did a lot of people who've felt like Margaret's been overreaching. But Margaret needed someone whose car she could target who would actually work in her favor. Someone whose destruction would garner sympathy. Someone who didn't have a lot of allies in the community. Karen sat back down. The chair felt harder than before. Everything felt harder. What happens now? Now. Judith's being charged with destruction of property and vandalism. We're building a case against Margaret for conspiracy, fraud, and extortion. Her lawyer is already making calls trying to minimize her involvement. She's claiming she never explicitly instructed Judith to do anything, that Judith is misinterpreting their conversation. But I heard her on the video. You heard me describe what was on the video, Delgado said carefully. You haven't actually heard it yourself. That's evidence in an ongoing investigation. But yes, we have it documented. Karen's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a notification from the Pine Ridge HOA Facebook group. Her heart sank before she even opened it. There were 47 new comments on a post Margaret had made an hour ago. I'm devastated to inform our community that we've had a serious crime. A beloved resident's vehicle was targeted with acid vandalism last night. I've been working around the clock with law enforcement to ensure our community's safety. Thanks to our comprehensive security system and swift police response, the culprit has been identified. This is exactly why we invested in protection for our families. I want everyone to know that I take the security of Pine Ridge personally. We will not tolerate this kind of behavior. The county DA's office called Karen at 7:22 a.m. on Thursday. She hadn't slept. She'd spent the entire night going through public records, cross-referencing financial statements, and falling deeper into the rabbit hole of Margaret Stott's financial manipulations. At some point around 4 a.m., she'd made a pot of coffee and stopped pretending she was going to rest. Miss Hartwell, the voice belonged to Assistant District Attorney Patricia Chen, who sounded like she was already 3 cups of coffee ahead of Karen's current 2. I'm leading the prosecution team on the Stott case. I need to meet with you this morning. Can you come to the county building at 9 a.m.? What did you find? Karen asked. More than we bargained for, Chen said, and her tone suggested this was very much an understatement. But I need to show you in person. This isn't the kind of thing to discuss over the phone. The county building was a brutalist concrete structure that looked like it had been designed to crush hope. Karen sat in a waiting area outside Chen's office, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her purse. She'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on business casual, slacks and a blouse, the uniform of respectability. She wanted to look serious, competent, believed. Chen was a woman in her mid-50s with steel gray hair and the kind of direct eye contact that suggested she'd spent decades learning how to read people. She led Karen into her office and closed the door without small talk. "What we're dealing with here is unprecedented," Chen said, sitting behind a desk covered with organized stacks of paper and multiple computer monitors. "In my 22 years as a prosecutor, I've never seen this particular combination of crimes. Margaret Stott committed fraud, extortion, conspiracy, and money laundering, but she also created what amounts to an unauthorized domestic surveillance operation." Chen pulled up an image on one of her monitors. It was a map of the Pine Ridge subdivision, overlaid with red dots and blue lines. Each dot marked a location. The blue lines showed patterns of movement. "The HOA cameras were just the beginning," Chen explained. Margaret didn't stop there. "We found records of payments to a private security company for additional monitoring services. Those payments started 18 months ago and totaled $43,000. When we subpoenaed their records, we discovered they'd installed at least 15 additional cameras in the community. In common areas, yes, but also in places that aren't technically public. The trail behind the community center, the maintenance path between houses, the park where children play." Karen felt her stomach turn. "That's illegal. Extremely illegal," Chen agreed. "But it gets worse." Margaret wasn't just recording. She was analyzing. "We found encrypted files on her personal computer, files she kept hidden even from the other HOA board members. Video clips, categorized by resident, timestamps, notes." Chen clicked to another file. This one opened to show a folder structure. It was organized alphabetically by last name. Under H was Hartwell Karen. Chen opened that folder. Inside were dozens of video clips and screenshots. Karen saw herself in her driveway. Karen backing out of her garage. Karen walking to her mailbox. Karen sitting on her front porch reading a book. The timestamps spanned months. Entire months of being watched without her knowledge. "Oh my God," Karen whispered. "There's more," Chen said grimly. She opened another folder. This one was labeled Patterns. Inside were spreadsheets documenting when Karen had visitors, how long they stayed, what time she left for work, when she came home. There were notes in Margaret's handwriting analyzing her movements, speculating about her social connections. One note read, "KH left community 7:15 p.m. with unknown male. Returned 11:47 p.m. Relationship status needs clarification." Karen felt violation like a physical thing, like Margaret had been living inside her life. "She was tracking you," Chen said quietly. "All of you. Everyone who was on that removal petition. Everyone who questioned her authority. We have similar files on the Kellers, the Chens, David and Judith Crane, and at least 12 other residents." "Why?" Karen asked, though she thought she already knew the answer. "Leverage," Chen said. "Control." Margaret had constructed a narrative in her mind where she was the only thing standing between order and chaos. She believed that she needed to know everything, see everything, predict everything in order to maintain her vision of the perfect community. When people threatened that vision, she used the information she'd gathered to manipulate them, sometimes through blackmail, sometimes through subtle intimidation. The acid on your car was just the most obvious manifestation of a much larger pattern of coercion. Karen stared at the photos of herself. The violation felt active, ongoing, like Margaret was still watching. "What are you going to do? We're building a case for illegal surveillance under state law. Combined with the conspiracy and fraud charges, we're looking at a substantially longer prison sentence. We're also looking at civil liability. Every resident who was illegally recorded is going to have grounds to sue the HOA and potentially Margaret personally. We're talking about potential civil judgments in the millions." Chen pulled up another document. "But there's something else. Something we need your help understanding." The document was a financial ledger. It showed regular payments made to someone identified only as JS. The payments had been going on for 6 months and totaled approximately $28,000. "Do you know who JS might be?" Chen asked. Karen's mind raced through the community roster. Jessica. Jennifer, wait. There's a Jennifer Stanley. She's on the architectural review board with Margaret. Chen nodded and opened another file. It was a video screenshot showing Jennifer Stanley and Margaret Stott meeting at a coffee shop. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. Margaret had passed what looked like an envelope to Jennifer. Jennifer had passed back a folder. We believe Jennifer Stanley was helping Margaret with the surveillance, Chen said. We found recordings she made that Margaret had stored on encrypted drives. Jennifer has residential access to properties. She's an interior designer who consults with residents about renovations. We think she was documenting people's homes, their possessions, their habits while she was inside doing design consultations. That's insane, Karen breathed. It is, Chen agreed. It's also extremely effective. Jennifer would see the interior of homes, photograph things, gather information, and report back to Margaret. Combined with the external surveillance and Margaret's data analysis, they essentially created a comprehensive profile on half the neighborhood. Karen thought about her own home. She'd never hired Jennifer for interior design work, but others had. The Kellers had. The Chens had. What are you going to do about her? We're building a case. We have evidence of her involvement, but we need to be careful. She has a lawyer now, and she's claiming she was unaware of any illegal activity. That Margaret told her the information was for community security purposes. We'll see what a jury thinks of that defense. Chen leaned back in her chair. But here's why I called you in. We need someone from the community to help us understand the scope of this. We need to know who else might have been involved. Who else had access to information that shouldn't have been available? Were there other board members helping Margaret? Other residents she'd corrupted? Karen felt the weight of what Chen was asking. She was being asked to become an informant, to turn her community inside out and expose every secret, every sin, every hidden arrangement that had been enabling Margaret's reign. I'll help, Karen said. Whatever you need. By Friday afternoon, Karen had compiled a comprehensive list of everyone on the HOA board and their relationship to Margaret. She'd cross-referenced it with the surveillance files and the financial records. What emerged was a picture of coordinated corruption that went far deeper than anyone had initially realized. The head of the Architectural Review Board, a man named Vincent Torres, had been receiving payments from Margaret under the guise of consulting fees. In reality, he'd been rubber-stamping approvals for Margaret's preferred projects and denying permits for residents she considered problematic. The Chen's blue shutters? Vincent had recommended the fine. The Kellers' initial expansion request? Vincent had recommended denial. All at Margaret's direction, the treasurer of the HOA, a woman named Barbara Kim, had been manipulated into looking the other way on Margaret's financial irregularities. Karen found emails where Margaret had mentioned Barbara's son's college acceptance to a school Barbara couldn't otherwise afford. The implication was clear. Margaret knew things. Margaret could help or harm. Barbara had chosen to help, and then there was Derek, the assistant in the HOA office, the one who'd pulled up the surveillance footage that had caught Judith. Karen met with him on Friday evening, and what he told her made her blood run cold. She told me you were dangerous, Derek said quietly. They were sitting in a Starbucks across town from Pine Ridge, away from cameras and prying eyes. She said you were trying to undermine the community, that you were a bad influence. She showed me footage of you meeting with a real estate agent. She said you were trying to sell to a developer who wanted to rezone the neighborhood. I met with a real estate agent to get my house appraised, Karen said flatly. For my own information. That's not illegal. I know that now, Derek said miserably. But at the time, Margaret was so convincing,